reverends and religious leaders from all over to join in their talks. What was happening here was an effort to unite the world and paralyze her enemy. In Catholic Power Today by Avram Manhattan we read, "The Catholic Church's offer for reunion to all Christian churches not in communion with her is a magnificent ecclesiastical Trojan horse, a means to penetrate their citadels and accomplish their capture and final capitulation." Catholic Power Today, page 22. And this is how she plans to do it. She will support any military or economic force or movement that would maintain things while she is in power. If she can't accomplish it that way, she'll mobilize her religious and diplomatic power to counteract against her opponent in the event she fails to crush it another way. But finally, her last bid is forming an alliance with it, characterizing her joining it. In special circumstances, even leading it, as she's doing today in the great movement for peace and disarmament in the world and the ecumenical movement. This is one of her last assaults. She led out in the charismatic movement secretly, and in time, as it passed the borders of the Catholic Church, and Protestants saw that now the Catholic Church was speaking in tongues. These are Catholic priests. Catholics and Protestants together in great revival meetings will be speaking in tongues together. Some of these folks will be speaking in rosaries, while the others beside them are speaking in tongues. It seems to adapt itself to every religious climate today. Spiritualism has joined Christianity. It was this Pope, the next Pope to take office, Paul VI, that took over the world in a great movement of ecumenism. He finished up the work of the Vatican II. Here he is uniting himself with the Greek Orthodox Church. And we find that today, because of the great ecumenical movement that was begun and is sponsored by the Roman Catholic Church, the Protestants are paralyzed. They no longer speak out against Rome. This man here is Walter Martin, Dr. Walter Martin. Supposedly he's a great man in the evangelical circles. He accuses the Seventh-day Adventist Church of being a cult because they claim Ellen White is a pope, or they take Ellen White, he says, as a pope. And yet, he will not call the Catholic Church a cult. He says she's a Christian church today. What is happening to the Protestant world? It was the Catholic Church that opened up her doors and invited the communist heads of state in. Here's President Tito from Yugoslavia in meeting with the Pope at the Vatican. Pope Paul VI became the communist pope, the pope of the proletariat, mingling among the workers in the various areas of the world. They even devised an entirely new image of Jesus for the populaces now in the Marxist Catholic system. Jesus was depicted as a white-collar worker, and posters were put in the factories of the third world countries. In other places, Jesus was depicted as having overalls or with tools in his hands. Christ was now that God that many years before Adam Weishaupt had pointed out that he was. In 1973, this magazine came out on the Jesuits. Here it made it appear that the Jesuit order was in search of a new identity, that they didn't know what they wanted to do, that they were in a state of flux. It shows the Jesuit priests as common, everyday, dressed people. But still, it showed that Jesuits are involved in the various activities of missionary endeavors all over the world. Some, like Nixon aide McLaughlin, are in politics. Movie actor O'Malley, and here a Congressman Drennan at the Capitol. This is a Jesuit priest named Dan Lyons, and a book by John D. McCullum. Here it pointed out that Dan Lyons was an expert on Asiatic affairs and counseled Richard Nixon. It was his counsel to bomb Cambodia that Richard Nixon followed. Here he is with Commander Abrams, working in Vietnam. How far have these men gone? What secret mechanisms are even being worked out still today in politics, in religion, and all over the world? They make us feel like they're looking for a new identity. But friends, they know exactly what they're doing in the great world revolution that's taking place today. This man, the head of the FBI, made it very clear that the communists are deliberately maneuvering among the Negroes to create a situation for outbreak of racial violence to such an extent that it can be turned into a civil war on a racial basis. In such a civil war, should they succeed in fomenting it, the communists hope to so undermine the American government and our social structure that they can take over power. In the racial civil war that they envisage, they are sure the Negroes will be in the front ranks, the shock troops of the communist revolution. This is quoted from a congressional record, August 7, 1963. Brethren, the spirit of prophecy tells us, and I don't have the quote or the source of the quote now, it's in the United States, but that again, there'll be a racial movement, the army will be called out to put it down, and men will go back into servitude. And the result of it will be a Sunday law. Friends, we're seeing a fulfillment of the spirit of prophecy taking place today. In this book, The Negroes in the Soviet America, written by a communist, published in the South, encouraged the Negro people to rise up and form their own country in the South. And that under communism, they would be exalted to a much higher position in society. This is a communist class that was held in the South. And as you notice on the far right-hand corner, you see that is Martin Luther King, a communist being trained to carry on this revolution. And I want you to know right now still that the revolution, communist revolution, the spearhead of it is the Jesuits in the Roman Catholic Church. I'll prove that to you in a minute. Here he is with known card-holding communists from the conspiracy that took place in Hollywood. Beside him, Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte. Violence is being planned today, brethren. I was down at the flea market down in the city, and there a man came up to the table. He heard me talking about prophecy with someone else, and he said, "Would you tell me something?" He said, "Would you please tell me why the black folks down here in the city are hoarding automatic weapons? Just down the street from me I saw a van pull up and they unloaded boxes of automatic weapons into a garage. What is happening? What are they planning?" Brethren, I don't know how long until the cities are a hotbed of violence because of these type of plans. But it's coming, and Ellen White tells us that it's going to be an overwhelming persecution, relentless in its fury. The Catholic Church is involved in this ethnic action publicly. In Africa, she is making the black prelates the only prelates there. So the church will relate to a black church at that point. This gentleman, Pope John Paul I, was in for only 33 days. The reason for this gentleman coming in for only 33 days is that he was the choice of the communist influence. The church had become fearful that Moscow would dominate the church, that she would take over it. Prelates began to move. They worked with the CIA. Cardinal Wyszynski from Poland was summoned to this secret meeting, and they decided to plan to get Wojtyla in. Wojtyla had already been deeply involved in the Vatican II project. He was an extremely intelligent man, and he was trained in the field of acting and playwriting. He was the perfect man for the job. He was a Marxist, but he was an anti-Moscow Marxist, and he would be perfect for developing the new brand of Lenin Christianity that they believed was the new age in this world. John Paul, in the liberal magazines in this country, which we know are controlled by the elements that are involved in world conspiracy, set him up as a superstar. 14,000 journalists were accredited to cover his passage through this country. Millions and millions of dollars have been used to place this man in a campaign as a god among the nations today. And the Protestants, where are they? They're completely paralyzed. Protestants for the Pope. We see that a Protestant Baptist president invited the Pope to do the Mass on the White House lawns. He was invited